Welcome to our June 15th broadcast. Ryan McBeth, intelligent analyst, software architect, and cybersecurity insider, joins us. It's always good to see you, Ryan. Welcome back to the broadcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy I can be here.
Thank you. You know, Ryan, you've closely analyzed military and intelligence affairs. How would you characterize the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu today? Is it driven more by personal trust, strategic interest, or political necessity? And we cannot ignore the fact, the expletive that the president used in his interview with Access, talking about Netanyahu's judgment, and the Hill just reported a few months ago about the intensity and the strained relationship now.
Well, I can tell you that there's an old saying that nations don't have allies, only interests. And for a while, the interests of the United States and Israel were aligned. We wanted to attrit Iran's Air Force, attrit their Navy, attrit their nuclear weapons manufacturing capability, and attrit their capability to manufacture ballistic missiles. And for the longest time, for about 38 days, I believe, our interests were aligned. Now, Iran also wanted to see regime change, Israel wanted to see regime change inside of Iran. The United States could take it or leave it. We basically didn't want them to have a nuclear weapon. Of course, Israel didn't want that either. And that's kind of where the interests start to diverge between President Netanyahu, or Prime Minister Netanyahu, and President Trump. So I can tell you this, I think President Trump sees this as over because Iran's ability to enrich uranium has been degraded. It may be degraded further depending on whatever deal we come up with in the next 60 days. So as much as Prime Minister Netanyahu might want to continue the fight into Lebanon, and if you want to get technical, Lebanon has nothing to do with Iran. It's not Iran's country. They've been destabilizing that region since 1982. As much as he'd like to continue fighting in Lebanon, that might not necessarily be on the table, or he's just going to have to do it without U.S. backing.
You know, throughout this conflict, have we seen evidence that Netanyahu has unusual influence with President Trump, or is Trump largely pursuing his own strategic objectives?
I don't think anybody has influence with President Trump, in all honesty. You know, the guy, he always seems to kind of go with his gut. And he might change his mind 2 or 3 times in one conversation, or he agrees with the last person who he had a conversation with. There are people who, and your garden variety anti-Semites, who like to say that Netanyahu controls President Trump. Nobody controls President Trump. I have a very hard time believing that. But as long as our interests are aligned, then it makes sense to continue with dancing in step with Israel. The moment our interests are no longer aligned, then we back off. And I can see why the president might have been upset with Prime Minister Netanyahu for various things he's done before, but he's going to have to fall in line behind the president if he wants to see the end of this conflict.
You know, in this framework of a peace agreement, no matter how fragile, how much input did Netanyahu have, and also the Iranians?
So, regarding Prime Minister Netanyahu, I don't think he really had any. He might have asked for some things, but at this point, the United States has taken the lead in the conflict. Israel got off to a great start, destroying Hezbollah, or no, not Hezbollah, destroying the IRGC commanders, Iranian leadership. And then the United States took over the operational tempo for a lot of the attacks against Iran. So how much input did Iran have into this? We really don't know. And supposedly Iran released a 14-point list of items for their peace deal. We don't know if that's just something they made up. We don't know if it's real. So we really don't know. The people who do know are the people who are in the room, and Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and J.D. Vance. They probably know. They probably know very well. But that information just hasn't been released yet. From what we understand, Iran is going to promise, they're not going to reopen the Straits of Hormuz because they were never closed, but Iran is going to promise not to attack any shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to stop impounding Iranian tankers. After 60 days, we will have some sort of agreement as to what to do with the nuclear material. There'll be some sanctions relief, and life can go on.
Do you think Trump's approach has strengthened Israel's security position, or has it increased America's more exposure to the conflict? And does this agreement benefit Israel?
I think this agreement benefits Israel, at least in the short term, because it means no more ballistic missiles are going to fall on Israel. There's some other benefits as well, in the sense that Israel has been able to take out more members of Hezbollah. Lebanon seems interested in moving south and actually taking control of their country again. So I think in some ways, Israel is a little bit safer. In other ways, they have seen what Hezbollah can do with first-person view drones, and they do not yet have a plan for that, which I've talked about before, and personally I think is inexcusable that Israel's military doesn't really have a plan for dealing with these small, cheap first-person view drones that Hezbollah is launching. But I do think that Israel in general is safer, since Iran's finances have been degraded so much by America blocking the Strait of Hormuz so no oil tankers can get in. They've lost between $450 to $500 million per day, which is going to make it much tougher for Iran to rebuild their infrastructure or refund Hezbollah forces. So I think this is a strategic win for Israel.
Many are describing this ceasefire as extremely fragile. What indicators are military planners watching most, and what gives you the biggest concern about the ceasefire? And exactly what is in the agreement as it relates to uranium, as it relates to whether there's going to be reparations, as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf states and the flow of oil?
Well, regarding what's in the agreement, we really don't know. We know there's a 60-day timeline to negotiate for nuclear material. I know that supposedly one of the things in the agreement is that Iran will blend their uranium down to between 3% and 5%, which is what you can use in a nuclear reactor. And I am 100% for that. Everyone should have a nuclear reactor. We have a magic rock that can boil water. We should be using the magic rock, including Iran. Regarding what military planners are looking at, they're basically looking at the sea. Are Iranian boats trying to sortie out into the sea cause any kind of trouble? The other thing we need to look at is Iran trying to dig out any air assets that may have been underground? So we're talking drones, we're talking fixed-wing aircraft, maritime patrol aircraft. Are they going to try to reassert control over the Strait of Hormuz once everything is finished? And also, what is Hezbollah doing? Because Iran's MO, their modus operandi, has been to tell Hezbollah, fire a couple of rockets into Israel, and then when Israel responds to the rocket fire, Iran says, look, Israel violated the ceasefire. Again, this is not your country. But Iran seems to link Hezbollah and Lebanon with the general Middle East and actions that Israel is taking. So the other thing to look at would be Hezbollah. What are they doing? Are they still launching rockets, or are they moving north above this river that Israel has said is a line of contact that they don't want Hezbollah below?
That leads me to, in your assessment, what do you see as the threat to this ceasefire holding? Military miscalculation, political pressure inside Israel, political pressure inside Iran, or actions by the proxy groups? And because we do know that there is a crisis of leadership in Iran, one side with the citizens and one side with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and they're both fighting for position. There's a side that are more sympathetic to meeting the United States demands to try to stop ceasefire. There's another side that wants this to continue with no end in sight.
I think that the biggest danger we have is factionalization among the IRGC. There may be some members of the IRGC who want to continue fighting. Remember, one of the tenets of Twelver Shia Islam is that in order for the Mahdi, who is this Messiah-like figure, to return, you must have a time of great tribulation. And so these IRGC officers who believe in that philosophy may want to continue this conflict in the hopes that there is a ground invasion or the United States uses a nuclear weapon on Pickaxe Mountain to try to destroy some of the uranium stored there. That is probably the biggest risk, the factionalization among IRGC officers who may not be listening to the civilian leadership of the military.
You know, I'm curious, Ryan, how often do these ceasefires fail? Not because leaders want war, but because events on the ground spiral beyond anybody's control. Any miscalculation, any miscommunication that's left up to someone to interpret can lead to an incredible escalation in this conflict.
And I mean, it happens occasionally. I mean, you look at Ukraine, sometimes you have localized ceasefires. On occasion, a unit might approach another unit and get into a fight, and one unit says, hey, can we have a 2-hour ceasefire in order to tend to our wounded and bring people back? That's usually at the tactical and operational level. When it comes to conflict in general, for the most part, I would say it's 50-50. That sometimes ceasefires hold and they turn into actual peace treaties. I mean, we kind of saw that in Serbia. And sometimes they don't, and events just keep spinning out of control. And I guess another good example of that is Ukraine, where they had a ceasefire so that Putin could have his little parade on Victory Day, and then by Monday he's back to hitting Ukrainian buildings just because he can. So it really depends on the nature of the conflict and the disposition of the leadership.
Your voice, your future town hall. Ryan McBeth is our guest. Much more on this edition. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back after these messages. And we're back with Ryan Israel. I'm curious to your insights on whether Iran has emerged from this escalation weakened, strengthened, because they get to define what is weak means to be weakened, because they're still standing. Their government is still standing, despite losing so much of their leadership, and they continue to fight. They continue to have leverage. So what's your assessment?
I can tell you, I guess we've had a blockade on them for about 60 days. So if you're losing between $450 and $500 million a day, I don't care how strong you think you are, you're pretty darn weak. And no matter how much money we might agree to release to Iran as part of the peace deal, it's going to take a while for that money to flow through the system. There are people who have been fired from their jobs because they couldn't have internet. And let me ask you this, if you were a company in Kazakhstan and you hired an Iranian software company to write your business software, could you trust ever hiring an Iranian company again? Because what if the IRGC decides to cut off the internet again? Now what do you do? So that's been taken out. Iran's software industry, Iran's engineering industry, their civilian industry. It is a country of 95 million people. They have industry there. Would you ever buy anything from Iran again if you can't guarantee that someone won't turn off their internet because some IRGC colonel decided that he wanted to play games, right? Now, they're certainly weaker on the world stage, even though the regime is still in power. They have less money. They have less ability to project power. They have fewer weapons that they can shoot at their neighbors. I would say in general, yes, they are a lot weaker.
What does Iran want?
Iran wants to construct a nuclear bomb and use that nuclear bomb to create the end of the world, to cause a nuclear conflict, create the end of the world, and bring back the Mahdi, this Messiah-like figure who will then march to Jerusalem and defeat the Antichrist with Jesus by his side. That's what they ultimately want. If you are a 12er Shia, you believe that the 12th Imam disappeared in the year 868. He has not been seen since, and he is in hiding and will only return during a time of great tribulation. So Iran must cause this to happen in order to fulfill their prophecy. Ultimately, that is what they want to do. Whether that is a reasonable goal anymore, after we've destroyed a good portion of their nuclear enrichment facilities, that's a pretty good question. It may have only pushed it back by 20 years.
How are the Gulf states assessing this conflict, and how will they prepare going forward? And what is it they want the United States to continue doing? And also, can they ever trust the Iranians?
Well, just generally, most of the Gulf states are Sunni Muslims, and Iran is Shia. And the Sunnis don't tend to like the Shia very much in the first place. They consider them Muslims, but they're at the edge of apostasy, right? They consider them apostates. They might not necessarily be true Muslims like the Shia, because the Shia believe that true leadership extends through the caliphs, the learned scholars who are a descendant from the original time of Muhammad, whereas the Shia believe that the original heir to the Islamic throne is Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali. So the Gulf states, what the Gulf states really want is to make sure Iran cannot pull this again. And in order to do that, well, one of the big things that they should probably look into is creating an actual navy. The Saudi Arabian Navy is laughable. And there's a very simple reason for that. It's because a lot of their respected elders, a lot of the elites of society, they want to become jet pilots. And jets parade well, and it's a place where you can park your elites, the sons of the elite, for their military service, and they can look dashing in their scarf posing by their jet. But navies, those are lunchbox workers, right? You look at Saudi Arabia, it's a peninsula. They should have a giant navy full of frigates and destroyers. Saudi Arabia should have been able to escort ships through the Gulf, but they don't have that navy because it doesn't parade well, right? Nobody wants to serve on a ship. It's hot, it's hard work. Want to be a jet pilot. So that's another thing that they need to look into. They need to look into creating an actual honest-to-God Navy. Another thing Gulf states want is better air defense. Our Patriot systems worked well, but now they're all looking at Ukraine going, hey, Ukraine has some great anti-drone defense. We're firing Patriot missiles that are pretty darn expensive. How can we bring this cost down? So there's a lot that the Arab states have to think about moving forward when it comes to defense. And I think what they've realized is that their militaries that parade really well can't really fight when it actually has to matter.
Explain Israel and Lebanon and how that could be very disruptive to Trump's plans of signing a final peace agreement that could have some degree of teeth to it, because it can't last forever.
Yeah, I can tell you that, well, it could last forever. The Lebanese have to... The Lebanese have to get their act together, march south, and start killing Hamas or Hezbollah fighters. Explain Lebanon. How much time we got? Do I have the rest of the hour? Lebanon was essentially carved out of Syria to make sure that Syria didn't get too powerful. Lebanon's structure is kind of weird. They have required to have a Christian president who's the most powerful person in Lebanon. The vice president, prime minister, is a Sunni Muslim, and the Speaker of the House, or the Speaker of their parliament, is a Shia Muslim. And so you have kind of three people of three different religions, this is required in their constitution, all of whom don't get along, all of whom are vying for power. And for the longest time, Lebanon really didn't work to industrialize the south where a lot of Shia lived. So a lot of Shia were very poor. So 1982, Lebanon Civil War, Iran comes along, they start throwing dollars around. Look, you got to feed your family. Iran hands you a rifle and a couple of dollars. Well, who are you going to be loyal to? You're probably going to be loyal to Iran. So Iran has been influencing Lebanon for years. And it has been absolutely horrible for the people of Lebanon to have to deal with Iran. I think a lot of Lebanese don't like Iran either. Now, the issue is that Hezbollah is beholden to Iran. Getting weapons over to Hezbollah has been a lot harder ever since Bashar al-Assad fell in Syria, because there's that conduit that's kind of missing, the conduit that went from Iran through the northern part of Iraq and the Shia militias that were associated with Iran through Syria into Lebanon. So they have fewer weapons now than they did before. I mean, these guys had air defense systems and everything. So the nightmare scenario here is that Hezbollah continues to fight. The Lebanese military either can't fight Hezbollah or they're not willing to fight Hezbollah. And then you have Israel having to go back into Lebanon and continue fighting because Hezbollah keeps firing rockets at Israel. So that's kind of the nightmare scenario that you might see in this after this peace treaty.
Well, here's the important question of the night.
Yeah.
Where has the United States succeeded? Where has it weakened Iran? Where has it made it safer for Americans in America and around the world from being targeted by Iran as we have been for the last 47 years? What are the successes of this White House, Ryan?
So there's a number of successes. One of those successes is that now the Iranians know that if you reach out and touch an American, we will find you and we will kill you. And Secretary Hegseth said exactly that. You harm an American, we will find you and we will kill you. They also know that their leadership is not in some kind of bubble. Just because you're in a bunker somewhere doesn't mean you're on home plate or you're on first base and we can't reach out and touch you. We will find where you are and we will kill you. We've also reduced their air defenses to essentially nothing. We've reduced their Air Force to essentially nothing. We've reduced their Navy to a bunch of small speedboats. So those are all things that America was very, very good at doing. We've also taught Iran that our ISR, or intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, is second to none. If you launch a missile, our space-based infrared system, SIBRs, will detect where that missile launched from. And now you've probably got 3 to 5 minutes to get that transport erector launcher undercover or back into a cave, because we're going to know where you are. Now we know where the entrance to that cave is, and we're going to put a bomb through it.
But let me tell you what the problem here is, though.
Yeah.
That is accurate as long as you have someone with the bravado of Donald Trump in the White House. In less than 2 years, Donald Trump is no longer in the White House. And the Iranians understand this. They calculate. They plan for the long term. With all that you said, put that into perspective when Donald Trump is no longer in the White House.
Depending on who gets in there, that could be an issue. Look, in some ways, the president handed the next president a very interesting gift. And that gift is our doctrine called Joint All-Domain Operations, or JADO. That doctrine was proven to work. We were able to find a bad guy, send that information to a decider, a person who can actually choose to hit that target, and then service that target within minutes. And one of the gifts that came out of that is China. China has seen our JADO doctrine, and they are likely looking at Taiwan and going, man, maybe we need to rethink this. Because the United States will find us in our bunkers and kill us. the politicians that ordered the war, high-ranking generals, we will find you, we will drop a bomb on you. And then China's not safe either, because wherever you have your long-range missiles that you're going to use to bombard Taiwan, we are going to find those and we are going to destroy them.
Ryan McBeth, I could go on with you for who knows. Excellent conversation, excellent insights. Always appreciate having you on, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is your voice, your future town hall. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. And welcome back to the broadcast. Steve Laffey, Jordan Goodman. It's always a pleasure having you on. Steve, what gives you hope and despair at the same time when you look at the U.S. and the global economy?
Well, despair, I guess we'll go with first, because we just haven't done what we said we were going to do. When the President Trump came in and Scott Bessent, they targeted 3% growth, 3% more million barrels of oil per day, getting our debt down to 3% of GDP. None of that's happening. First, let's talk about the debt. The debt is continuing. It's $1.9 trillion this year. Our interest costs are now over and above what we spent on defense, even when Donald Trump, rightfully so, tries to raise it. So the despair is that we're not fixing big problems. Like Social Security came out yesterday or over the weekend, with another report that it's $71 trillion in arrears, not $61 trillion in arrears. It's an extra $10 trillion, dwarfing our national debt. So when you start looking at what people are doing in what they call the K-shaped economy, and the middle class is really borrowing more just to survive. But along the way with student loans, which here's a statistic for you, people over 50 have the most student loans and are in the arrears by 20%. 20% of people with student loans over 50. It's an incredible statistic. You look at what's happened with credit card debt. People aren't making their payments. We have that rising. Repossessions of cars is back to where it was in 2008. So we can go through a myriad of statistics. It's dwarfed by the fact that really rich people, say the top 20% of the people, Armstrong, are spending 63% of consumer dollars. But the other people are borrowing to survive, not borrowing to get rich. And that's the despair. You know, if you look at the economy growing, a new study just came out. Without AI and data centers, the economy last year grew at 0.1%. 0.1%, not 2.1%. So 4% of the GDP is growing like a weed, and the rest of it's flat. So, you know, we're in this bubble economy now, and when it turns, I don't know what we go to, because we can't have a recession. If we have a real recession, a 1983-84 recession, caused by Paul Volcker again, right? We'll have a 9% debt to GDP, and the 10-year bond could yield 8 or 9%, because people are putting a risk premium into it now. These are real problems, and we got to get to them. Along the way, with what's happened with the war in Iran, it's soaked up almost all the money from tax cuts and anything people might have gotten that they're using to spend on energy.
You know, Jordan, the national debt has now exceeded $40 trillion.
Right.
At what point, Jordan, does this become a genuine threat to America's economic security and global leadership?
Well, it already has to some extent. I mean, it's sucking up, as Steve was saying, it soaks up a lot of interest money that can't go to other kind of programs. We're spending over $1 trillion on the national debt right now. We're adding $1 to $2 trillion a year, which means the principal's going up and the amount of interest we pay on it keeps going up, taking away from other programs. And I think it's hurting us internationally as well. A lot of countries around the world are trying to get out of using dollars in all kinds of ways, trading oil and Japanese yen and Chinese yuan. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and some other countries, have created an alternative currency to the dollar. which is called the BRICS unit, which is 40% backed by gold, so that they can do transactions without the dollar. So that's another indication of all this debt that we build up. And one of the main advantages we've had for many, many years, Armstrong, is the dollar being the world reserve currency. That keeps our interest rates and inflation down because everything has to go through dollars. If that changes, and a lot of countries are trying to change that, that hurts our economy as well.
You know, Steve, home ownership is truly out of reach for young Americans, whether we want to admit it or not. Is the problem primarily interest rates, housing supply, government policy? Is there another elephant in the room?
There's a lot of elephants in the room. You named some of them, and most of them, Armstrong. One of it is that the federal government always wants to do something about housing supply, yet it almost always lies within local governments and what they put on people and builders to build homes, all the requirements and so forth. Interest rates, and this is the thing about, we were just talking about, as rates have risen, and we talk about what's happening with the refinance of U.S. Treasuries at higher rates, causing higher interest rate paid, crowding out other investments, right? Even though the economy is still growing. What's happening in every segment of the economy is that somebody is going to buy a home, and instead of a 2% mortgage, today it's 6.5%. And the price is going up because of the lack of supply. And also you have people who don't want to sell because they have those 2% mortgages, right? So all of that has contributed to these high prices, but they're going higher because we can't build enough homes. So the American dream for many people, this house is right over there to my left. When I moved here, they were $210,000. Some were in foreclosure in 2010. One just sold for $680,000. Nice home. But the average person, if I pulled up my HP 12C and tried to calculate what was happening, it's putting so many people out of reach of buying a home. Like, by the way, and buying a car. And look what's happening to people who own apartment complexes. What do? Say you own 20 units, and it comes time to refinance, and you refinanced 7 years ago at 4%. Well, today they want 8%. Well, that totally destroys what you're doing in finances. So this is like every industry, Armstrong. The refinancing of business, of debt, of the U.S. Treasury to some guy with 3 units that 3 different families live in is all getting more expensive, along with what's happened with commodity prices. They're up. And even when oil, if there is indeed a lasting peace agreement, believe me, there's a premium now in the price of oil to get it through the Straits of Hormuz. It's almost like, folks, if you had 3 car accidents in a row and you were still insured by the insurance company, your premiums would be really high and they would go down over time because the insurance company doesn't trust you. Same thing with the price of oil. It's not going back to where it was, apples to apples, for years, no matter what happens with good news. And I don't think there's a lot of good news coming.
Jordan, what professions do you think should be most concerned about these technological disruptions, and how should workers prepare for that today?
Well, it's the white-collar jobs that use computers, basically. The growth of AI is just staggering. This year alone, there'll be over $700 billion invested in AI data centers. There's about 4,300 in America, and more being built all the time. And on top of that, you just had SpaceX go public on Friday, where Elon Musk talks about putting 1 million data centers into space. It's just kind of staggering. But if that were to happen, think of the computing power that can do the jobs that a lot of people doing spreadsheets and presentations and movie scripts, all kinds of things today that are kind of using intellectual property can be done in many cases by AI as it gets stronger and stronger. The next generation is what we call the AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is a leap above where we are now, which means, remember, it already has in its memory all of human knowledge, all music, all text, all film. It's already in there. Its ability to use it is still being developed. It threatens a lot of jobs, I think. It really does.
What are your thoughts on these data centers, Steve?
They use up lots and lots of energy. We're building as many as we can. In my memory, I'm unfortunately old enough to remember 1999, where we were putting the same sort of data centers, global crossings, put underwater cables across the Atlantic, across the Pacific. Everybody thought it would be $10,000 per foot or whatever, or so much, they get so much of return. Turns out prices collapsed. And so I think the same thing will happen with a lot of this AI stuff. Prices will collapse. And so the circular notion of NVIDIA lending money to somebody and saying, yes, so you do this and we'll sell you the chips to do it, but we'll give you the money to do it, that all works well on the upside. You take things like what's happening with SpaceX, look at the CapEx expenditures. If I'm studying companies, I'm looking at a company that's going from 0.4 of its revenue. For every dollar in revenue, it was spending 40 cents on capital expenditures. And then it got into AI, and now it's 2.2. These are enormous expenditures. So the data centers will be built. Global Crossings put those cables across. We use them today. It just isn't the same price. And when that turns in reverse, just think of one example. SpaceX, to go to that, was 4 times oversubscribed. As a guy who took a lot of companies public, that doesn't mean 4 times as many people wanted SpaceX stock. It means everybody thought some guy thought he'd get 1,000 shares. He put in for 4,000, got 1,000. Fidelity put in for 3 million, got 1/4 of that. That kind of stuff. That's what happens. Same thing with chip orders. If you think you can't get 1 million chips or 100,000 chips, whatever that may be, ask for 20,000. But one day, Armstrong, they deliver the 20,000 and you choke.
That's a fact. Jordan, if tensions with Iran escalate further, how quickly could Americans feel it at the gas pump and the grocery store?
Right away. I mean, we're hopeful that the agreement they've signed will hold. It's only for 60 days. And in theory, they're supposed to have the nuclear situation figured out by then. I don't see how that's going to happen. But if it does not happen, and if we have a further escalation and the Strait of Hormuz continues to be closed, it goes up right away. I mean, oil went up to almost $100 a barrel. Now, because of the agreement, it's now gone down to about $83 a barrel. Still a premium over where it was before the war. So it really depends which way things go, but it goes right to the pump. Now it goes up and it goes down. I mean, oil got up to, gasoline got up to about $4.50 a gallon at the peak nationally, and now it's back down to the low 4s, high 3 point something, because oil went down from 100 to 83. So it moves pretty fast, and people are seeing it. It's even at 83, it's still a stretch for a lot of people to be able to afford gas, and they need it. They have to be able to go to work, get groceries. I mean, gas is a pretty necessary thing. A lot of people can't do without.
Finally, Steve, in about a minute we have left here, has the Federal Reserve helped stabilize the economy, made conditions worse for working Americans?
Made conditions much worse. They target rich people, and they've made it so much worse for the middle class. First of all, targeting 2% inflation instead of 0. Second, never getting the 2% for 5 straight years and still keeping their jobs. They refuse to do the right thing. There is hope for Mr. Walsh. Maybe Kevin Walsh wants to be the Paul Volcker of his time. And I hate to say it this way. We need a large recession to clean the economy out. And yet the federal governments don't want this to happen because of the debt levels. It's a really tough situation for Kevin Walsh.
I'm looking forward to our next guest, JP, who's saved Standard Time. I've always been curious about this conversation and this movement of Standard Time. So we're going to welcome him when we return to our town hall, Your Voice, Your Future. Steve, Jordan, thank you so much always for joining the broadcast platform. And we'll be back. What is the strongest evidence that permanent daylight savings time improves the quality of life for Americans?
Well, actually, it's permanent standard time that would improve the quality of life for Americans. Scientifically and historically, we've found that permanent daylight saving time reduces our sleep quality and duration, and that has negative effects on our health, our safety, our performance in school and in the workplace.
How do you measure this?
How do we measure time itself?
No, how do you measure the stress level?
There are many scientific studies looking at the duration of sleep. Gentilla and Mazzona in 2017, for example, found that on average, when we're observing daylight saving time itself, we sleep an average of 19 minutes less every single night. When we're on standard time, we get a better quality of sleep because we're more aligned with our natural circadian biology.
Is that for all age groups?
Yes, yes. But most especially with adolescents. Adolescents generally have a later chronotype and they are more harmed by DST.
But doesn't changing the clocks twice a year disrupt productivity?
Yes. When we're changing the clock, especially when we spring forward from standard time to DST, we have an acute harm to our health and productivity. But also as we remain on that wrong clock, that we have a chronic harm that continues. If we maintain standard time throughout the year, that's how we get the best outcomes.
So why has Congress struggled for so long to change the time? Why?
Well, it's there can be a bit of finger pointing because
Well, point the fingers.
It can be this can be solved at the state level or the federal level. So that involves the states saying Congress should do it and Congress saying the states should do it. It's also tricky because a lot of people gravitate initially toward the idea of permanent daylight time because that's the clock that we do in the summer. But keeping the clock that we do in the summer is not going to magically turn the winter into summer.
So what are the economic benefits for restaurants, retailers, and businesses across the spectrum?
Now, there might be, hypothetically, a gain for evening businesses if we keep daylight saving time, but then there's going to be a harm for morning businesses because it darkens the morning, and it would have a drag on the overall economy because it is reducing productivity by 3 to 5%, I think Gibson found.
This is what blows me away. People think that this argument, if it's finally settled, believe it or not, can lead to a reduction in crime, less traffic congestion. Can you explain that? How this can reduce crime? And I know you've heard it.
I have. Well, the claim that DST reduces crime looks at a single kind of crime at a single time of the year. If you look at all types of crime and all types of the year, then you get a different outcome. So the idea of trying to fight crime by moving your clocks is like using a knife when you need a screwdriver. It's a silly idea. We should keep permanent standard time and just be using the honest-to-God sundial time. Time is meant to tell where the sun is positioned in the sky. It's what my grandfather taught me back on the rural Iowa where I grew up. 12 p.m., high noon, you divide the hours from there. DST is a way to trick ourselves into waking up earlier, and unfortunately, that leads to sleeping less.
So what can we, as a nation, learn from countries around the world that have experimented with permanent savings time, permanent daylight and standard saving time?
Most nations use permanent standard time, and that's how you get the best outcomes. The United States tried permanent DST in 1974, and it led to a sharp increase in fatal accidents involving school children. Russia tried permanent DST in 2011, and they were finding an increase in car accidents and depression. The United Kingdom tried it in 1967. So permanent DST usually doesn't last, while permanent standard time can last for a long time.
So if Congress were to quickly act, what would implementation look like?
The best thing Congress could do would simply strike the section of the Uniform Time Act that calls for the switching of the clocks, and then we'd be keeping standard time permanently. Unfortunately, the Sunshine Protection Act wants to rewrite the entire Uniform Time Act to advance everybody to mandate permanent DST nationwide, and that's the wrong way to go about doing it.
So, how did you explain that this can impact someone's physical health?
Well, if you, for natural health, you need a good diet, you need exercise, and you need good sleep.
I understand all that.
And to get good sleep, you need a good duration, a good quality, and good timing. We are designed to sleep when it's dark out and awake when it's light out. But DST makes us wake an hour early. When we spring forward in March, you're suddenly waking up in the dark and sending your kids to school in the dark.
Well, listen, what if your experience as mine is growing up on a farm? I gotta tell you, the changing of the time has no impact on my routine. None. I don't even think about it. And I'm sure there are many people out there like me, and it's no impact. And of course, now look, I run 3:45, 4 a.m. in the morning. You can say I can have less than an hour, I can have more light, but that hour, it really doesn't matter.
Well, and I live in Arizona where we have permanent standard time, and I love this time of year when I get extra daylight in the morning. I can wake up and have more time for working out before I start my day. I mean, it's a blessing to have this extra daylight in the summer, but changing the clock can't make that last into the winter. That's just the way the seasons are designed.
How did you come to this profession?
Well, as I said, my grandparents were farmers in Iowa. My great-grandfather taught me to tell the time from the sun. So all my life I've always said that we should keep standard time. When this came up in the news around 2018-19, my friends started asking me, are they doing this the right way, the way you've been asking about? And I found out that they were trying to do it the wrong way to meet the demands of those lobbyists for the evening businesses with permanent daylight time. So I started a Twitter account. I started emailing legislators, formed a nonprofit, and now I travel the country speaking about this issue.
If you had 2 minutes before a joint session of Congress, what would you say to lawmakers?
We need to keep permanent standard time. It's the natural clock that's more closely timed to the sun. We should be honest about the time of day. Standard time is the clock of our forefathers. First principles, history, and science all agree that it would be best for our health, safety, education, and the economy.
You know, so it's you know, there's just fascination with time, and I guess there is a difference when you think about it. But do you think a lot of this could lead to why people are vulnerable to sleep disruption and the other issues that people have that are centered around? Because I know many people, especially teenagers, who have trouble sleeping. You think it could have something to do with this?
Well, yes, because daylight saving time is a hidden mandate to wake an hour earlier than you would on standard time. We're already sending children to school too early in the morning. If we had more DST, we'd be sending them to school earlier for longer throughout the year. That can aggravate a lot of problems that people have. 1 in 3 Americans is sleep deprived. There's a host of cascading issues from lack of good sleep.
How much of America would you say, JP, America's broader health crisis could be connected, let's say, to chronic exhaustion and poor sleep habits?
There was a study last year out of Stanford from Dr. Laura Weed and Dr. Zeitzer finding that if we kept permanent standard time, we could see a great decrease in the amount of obesity and strokes.
I mean, maybe stroke, obesity?
Well, if you are not sleeping well, you make poor decisions. You might be eating things you shouldn't be eating.
So here's the question. Okay, what role does artificial light and screen exposure play in disrupting our natural biological rhythm?
That's a great question. When we are watching our screens late at night, it's delaying the natural release of melatonin, the hormone that makes us feel drowsy and ready for bed. So when you're getting too much light at night, either from screens or from daylight saving time, it delays that, it makes it harder to fall asleep.
But you know, it's interesting because it's rare after 6 p.m. because I'm so exhausted for how early I get up. I couldn't even look at a device if I wanted to because I'm so exhausted. Why has it been so difficult politically, do you think, for America to end daylight savings time despite bipartisan public support?
Well, part of it is the emotional attachment to summertime, and then there's also the lobbyists for golf and some chambers of commerce that push for more daylight saving time.
Tell me about these watches. You wear 2 watches. What's going on here?
Yes.
How many watches? What's going on? Pull your sleeve up. What is going on here?
Well, this is a Yes watch that's showing, it's a sundial watch showing me where the sun is positioned and what time the sunset, the dusk will come. This is a self-winding watch that will that I've manually set to the local solar time. So it's 6:45 here locally solar time while we're coming up at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time.
You know, I've enjoyed this conversation. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. It's been a pleasure talking to JP, and that's PEA.
Yes, sir.
JP, thank you so much for joining us for this edition. I'm Armstrong Winslow. I want to thank all our guests. Your voice, your future. Wow, I was noticing those.